Well, good morning again. If you have your Bibles, you can go ahead and turn with me to John chapter 5. John chapter 5. If you're not sure where that's at, that's in the New Testament. It's one of the first books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then you'll get to John. It's an account of the gospel. We'll get there in just a second. But today I'm a little excited because we're starting a new series on hope. On hope. How to find hope, how to live hope, and how to share it. And for the next several weeks, what we're going to be looking at is Jesus and interactions that he had with real people. And the reason we're doing that is because we're going to see the hope that Jesus offers, what it really looks like. Like the hope that Jesus offers, what actually is it, and who is it actually for? The hope that Jesus offers, what is it really, and who is it really for? Now, it doesn't take a genius this morning to figure out that everybody here has a few things in common. One, you're all here. Two, we all have experienced hurt. Everybody here at some time in their life has experienced hurt or some kind of suffering. And this morning, if you're a note taker, the title of today's sermon is Hope for the Hurting. Hope for the Hurting. And we're going to look at two different examples. And somebody said, Chase, so what do you know about hurting? Let me tell you, I experienced it firsthand this morning. I got up this morning. I've shared this with a few of you already. I got up this morning and I was getting ready and I was going over my sermon notes and I looked out the back window and all I saw was antlers. And it was about 8:45, 8:50, so that means I should be getting ready for church, okay? I'm going over my notes and I look and all I see is antlers just right there, 25 yards away from me. And I know I don't really have enough time to do this, but I tell Megan, I got to get the rifle. He's out there. So like most people, I'm sitting in my pajamas, so I throw on some basketball shorts, and I run out there, and I'm going to try to shoot this wide rack buck in the backyard. And I don't know how I was going to make it work, okay? I don't know, because we was short on time. But I figured it's a little chilly. It might be all right till we get back. So I sneak out the door, and I'm real quiet. I'm in stealth mode. I'm like Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible. Nobody sees me coming except for my lab. And so I get ready to make this shot. Okay, I'm getting the rifle, I'm going to pull it up, and I hear, "Roo," and the dog jumps, and so does the buck, and he trots away. Hurt, suffering. I have been moping around all morning. The rest of the morning I was getting ready, and I was just walking by looking out the window, just in case he came back. He never did. I was hurt. We all know about hurt. We all know about suffering, right? I've been a Georgia fan and a Braves fan my whole life. I know about it. But then we also know about some more serious types of hurt, right? We've probably all lost someone we loved. A few months ago, I lost the greatest man I've ever known, and that was still tough. Lost a friend last year. We've all lost loved ones. We may have been in relationships with somebody who was unfaithful, and that brought a lot of hurt, a lot of suffering we had to go through. Maybe somebody that we loved or we thought we could count on, they turned their back on us, a loved one. Almost feel like they stabbed us in the back, so that caused hurt and suffering. There's people who've had miscarriages that brought hurt and suffering. And then let's not forget about church hurt while we're at it, okay? Because listen, ain't no hurt like church hurt. You can do a lot of things to people, but if you break their heart inside these four walls, well, they're going to write you out of their will. But we all have it in common. We all have faced hurt and suffering. And sometimes, listen, let's just clear the air. Sometimes hurt and suffering that we go through in life, it is because of our actions, right? We talked about it the past couple weeks when we was looking at Jonah. A lot of times the hurt and suffering that we go through in life is a direct result of the sin in our life, of the actions that we've done. However, there are other times that we go through hurt and suffering that we have no control over. Things happen that are out of our control that we have to go through. And it's real. And it hurts. And a lot of times we don't know how to deal with that. This morning what we're going to have to understand is this, is that hurt will hinder you today. Hurt and suffering in your life, if you have not dealt with it or you don't deal with it, it will hinder you in some type of way. And the greatest determining factor that we can look at this morning for how hurt hinders us is where do we turn to for healing? In other words, when we are hurting and when we're suffering in life, when things happen that are out of our control, where do we turn to? Where do we try to cope? Where do we try to find healing at when we're going through these things in life that seem out of our control, that bring us pain, bring us a lot of emotions? Like, what do we do in those moments? Because whatever or whoever we turn to in those moments when we're hurting, that's where we're trying to find our hope. And this morning, what we're going to try to make clear is there's only one place you can really find hope. If you're hurting this morning, there is really only one true source of hope that you can find. Hope that the world didn't give and hope that the world can't take away. However, if we don't deal, like if you can't grasp this morning how to deal with hurt and suffering, you're going to be like a lot of people that we probably already know, that are in our families, that are friends that we know, people who don't know how to deal with suffering and hurt. They become bitter towards God. They become bitter towards His church and towards His people. And one of the reasons that happens is because we, as Christians, or in our culture, have believed three lies, three myths we'll look at this morning. She'll be on your screen. One of them, that is, if you live right, you will avoid suffering. Some people have bought into this lie that if you live right, then you'll be able to avoid suffering. So if I just do enough good, if I throw enough 20s in the plate, if I attend church, if I just shake somebody's hand and I say what I mean and mean what I say, then I'll kind of avoid suffering in my life. That's a lie. There's also the one that your hurt is always a result of your sin. Sometimes, yes, but always no. Again, we said a while ago, sometimes hurt and suffering comes in your life and it is out of your control. There's nothing you can do about it. And thirdly, that Jesus promises a life free of hurt. That Jesus promises a life free of hurt. The creator of the show, The Office, I know many of you have seen that show, he said one time, somebody asked him if he believed in God. And he does not, by the way. They asked him if he believed in God. He said, listen, why would I believe in a God who sat by and watched the Holocaust? Seems like a lot of people, what they believe is that God, the promise that Jesus gives, is that it is a life free of suffering. When actuality is the reason we have suffering and the reason we have hurt in this life is because we live in a broken world. We live in a broken world full of broken people. Those three myths right there will get us in a lot of trouble. And I know I told you to turn to John 5. You can stay there. But I'm going to read something for you out of Luke chapter 7, verses 18 through 20. Luke chapter 7, verses 18 through 20. And all this is going to do right here is it's just going to knock out these three myths. It's about John the Baptist. It says the disciples of John reported all these things to him, and John, calling two of his disciples, sent to him and sent him to the Lord, saying, "Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?" And when the men had come, they said, "John the Baptist has sent us to you, Jesus, saying, 'Are you the one that is to come, or shall we look for another?'" Now let me explain what this has to do with all this hurt and suffering. John the Baptist was a good man. John the Baptist loved the Lord. He baptized a lot of people. He told people to repent of their sins, place their faith in Jesus. Now listen, he was a little off, right? He had like camel hair clothing that he wore. But we have grown men that wear skinny jeans now, so you take what you can get. He had a little bit that was off with him. But he was a good man. He loved the Lord. He called people who were, these religious people who were always looking down on other people, he called them just a bunch of snakes. A good man who loved the Lord. And when what we just read, when that happened, John was in prison. He's an example of a good man who still went through suffering. He's an example of a good man who lived right, but he couldn't avoid suffering. He's an example of someone who was going through hurt and suffering that wasn't a result of his sin. And he's an example of somebody who knew that Jesus did not promise a life free of suffering, free of hurt. However, what John the Baptist does do is he gets his disciples, people who follow him, he said, listen, go to Jesus real quick and ask him, like, is this what's supposed to be happening? Is this how everything's supposed to be right now? Because right now I'm in prison, so I need you to go ask Jesus, like, are you really the one who's to come? Because this doesn't look at all like I thought life was going to look like following you. And you may be here this morning, you may be in a prison of pain of your own. And you may have asked that same question. And here's the thing. It is okay to ask God those questions. It is okay to come to Jesus and ask him, hey, listen, is this what's supposed to be happening right now? Because this ain't all how I painted my life to look. There's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt and suffering that's going on. Is this really a part of your plan? And the response that Jesus gives back, we won't have time to look at it, but the response he gives back, he tells the disciples of John to go back and tell John that the lame walk and the blind receive their sight. What he's referring back to John, what he is relaying back to John is this: listen, John, I'm still in control. I'm still doing what I came to do. Now, it's okay to have those questions. But we're going to see the difference is that where John turned to Jesus, the man we're about to look at, for most of his life, he did not. And if we're honest, most of the time I think we could say the same thing. When we come face to face with hurt and suffering, a lot of times the place we turn to often is not Jesus. It's other places. Take a look with me this morning at John chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. It says, after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which had 5 roof colonnades. Now the reason this is so special right here, this place, this pool of Bethesda, is in this time period, what people would do is they would come and they would sit by this pool. They would sit by this pool if they had something wrong with them. If they had some kind of disease, or they were hurt, or they were broken, they were lame. We'll get into more of that in just a second. But they had all kind of things wrong with them. What they would do is they would go and they would lay by this pool. Because the belief was that what would happen is that every now and then, God would send an angel down, and the angel would come and touch the water and stir it up. And they believed that the first person who could jump in the water after the angel had stirred it up, they would be healed. Whatever was wrong with them, if you could beat everybody else and leapfrog people like Kurt Bricker was last night into the pool, if you could do that and be the first one in there, then you would be healed of whatever was wrong with you. You say, well, that sounds crazy. Why would anybody actually believe that? The same reason people believe that they'll find hope at the bottom of a bottle. There's 2 reasons why anybody would believe that. There's the same 2 reasons any of us would believe we can find hope anywhere in life outside of Jesus. The first one is this, is they know they need healing. They know there's something wrong, right? And that's a good thing. When something is wrong, we admit that. They know there's something wrong. However, if we know there's something wrong, more than often, what we want to do is we want to fix it. So that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to fix it. However, they're also desperate. See, when we know something's wrong, we want to fix it, that's great. But then when we get desperate, that's where we have to be careful. Because when we get desperate, not only do we want to fix things, we'll do whatever we have to try to fix it. At any lengths of measure. And the only pool you actually end up in is a pool of regret, of doing things that you wish you wouldn't have done. Trying to find hope and trying to find healing. Let's keep going to verse 3. It says, in these colonnades here around this pool lay a multitude of invalids, blind, the lame, paralyzed. So we don't know the exact number. We just know there's a multitude of people here. There's a lot of people who are surrounded by this pool who are desperate and looking for hope. They're looking for it. They're all sitting there surrounded, looking for any way, looking for anywhere they can find some source of hope, some source of healing this morning. A multitude of them. Just like there may be today, a multitude of people looking for hope. But there's one man in particular that stands out to Jesus. Take a look at verse 5. One man was there who had been invalid for 38 years. 38 years. Could you imagine 38 years of running around searching for hope and healing? For 38 years, this man had been invalid. Waiting day after day after day. Trying place after person after pool. Trying to find hope somewhere. For 38 years. Have you ever wondered why God would make this man wait 38 years? Probably not. But I bet you have wondered why God has ever made you wait or go through suffering for some period of time. Or I bet you at least maybe have wondered about somebody else. Like we know people who've gone through hurt and suffering. We're like, God, listen, why do they have to keep going? Their family's already been through so much. Or we have already been through so much, God. Why do we have to keep going through this over and over and over? Why would God just to keep allowing, if he's such a good God, why would he keep allowing this stuff to happen over and over? Last Wednesday, I was talking to a lady here at the church. We was talking about somebody that we both knew, and they were going through a similar thing, a bunch of suffering, a bunch of hurt in their life. And their faith has just been so strong through all, really just kind of admiring their faith, going through hurt and suffering that they've been going through. And as we were talking, I was reminded about one of my favorite books, about a man named Charles Spurgeon. And there's a story in there that I was reminded of. See, when Charles Spurgeon grew up in the 1800s, he was walking through England one morning as a kid. And as he was walking through the fields, he looked over in the neighbor's yard, and he noticed a cage. And inside this cage was a baby fox. An 8-year-old boy walking inside of a fence, or inside of a cage, a baby fox trapped inside this cage. Charles Spurgeon it bothered him. It shook him to his core that he's seen this fox who looked so innocent just sitting in this cage. It just bothered him so much. The next day he was walking with his grandfather, who was a pastor, and he finally just had enough. He looked at his grandfather and he said, "Hey, Granddaddy, listen, why would God allow such a thing to happen?" Because remember, in Charles' eyes, this fox here, it's just innocent. It belongs wild and free. It's just a baby fox after all. His grandfather looked at him. It was very profound what he said. He looked at Charles, an 8-year-old boy, and he said, "Charles, sometimes God allows us to see things so it'll move us to change something about it. Sometimes, Charles, God will allow us to see things, to see hurt and suffering, so it'll move us so we can change something. Other times, Charles, God allows you to go through things so it'll move you." 38 years this man had sat there and looked for hope, wondering if it's ever going to come, desperately seeking to be healed, looking for hope over and over again. And maybe you're here today and you're the same way, right? Maybe you're going through something. Maybe it's not physical like this man was. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe it's emotional. And you're hurt and you're broken and you're looking for some type of hope somewhere that's actually going to make a difference, that's actually going to move you. It's going to move our hands and feet because it's going to change your heart. See, what we're going to see about this man is what's happened to a lot of people today. If you hurt long enough, and you go long enough without any type of hope in your life, it will eventually weigh you down. See, this man, he has withered legs, but the worst part about it is not his legs that are withered, it's his heart. See, if you go long enough, hurting long enough, and suffering long enough without any kind of hope, and going to other things in life, and trying to find hope in things that were never meant to really give you hope, and you're coming back empty over and over and over again, if you do that long enough, what's really going to be withered, what's really going to be broken is your heart. That's what's happening to this man here. Take a look at verse 6. So when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" 38 years. What do you think? Yes, I want to be. I've been waiting here. I've been looking everywhere. Why would Jesus ask me such a rhetorical question? 38 years, do you want to be healed? Why would Jesus ask such an obvious question? Do you want to be healed? The truth is this, is that some people don't want to be healed. Let me tell you why. Because they're hurt and they're suffering. That's where they found their identity at. See, because if my hurt and my suffering is gone, then I have lost the validation for the way that I live my life. If I lose the reason for that's the way I am. My hurt and suffering, if you have been through what I've been through, then you would understand why I do the things that I do. I can't lose my hurt and suffering. See, people are so wrapped up sometimes in their hurt and suffering, it's consumed who they are. It validates the lifestyle they live if they never address their hurt and suffering. See, some people can't find God the same reason a thief can't find a cop. Because it's going to require them to address some things in their life that they don't want to have to deal with. 38 years, and Jesus comes at him and says, do you want to be healed? It seems like such an obvious response. Look at verse 7. The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I am going, another steps down before me. Did you notice his response is not, yes, I want to be healed. He does like we do a lot of the times. Listen, I could. Let me say, listen, it's somebody else's fault. They just get there before I can. You know, listen, I'm just helping myself. There's nobody else going to help me. This is the reason I am the way that I am. He just gives it a bunch of excuses of why he's not healed, or why he's still hurting, of why his heart hasn't been fixed, not much less his legs. This is why I am the way that I am, God. This man answered as if he didn't have any real hope. Sir, when I try to go. See, he is so consumed, just like we get sometimes, he gets so consumed with ourselves and our way. See, I'll fix this my way. And here's what we do. If we have hurt and we have suffering, we've all been guilty of this. Well, I'm just going to handle it the best way that I can. You just let me deal with this the way that I need to deal with it. I can figure this out my own way. My own way. That's the anthem to hell. And I did it my way. So we live in a world and a culture today that says this. Hey, listen, you can just be the best you. Self-help books, top sellers right now. Whatever you can do that's going to make you the best version of you that you can get. It's all about you. We live in the world of I. It's what you want to do, whatever makes you feel good. How well has that worked out? If you can just be you, and if it's how you really feel, then if it makes you happy, then you do it anyway. That's the culture. That's the world we live in. But the question nobody's asking is this: hey, is it actually working? It's not. Here's the thing about you. The problem about you and about I, when I say this, I'm talking about myself as well. The problem with that is what Jesus says about you and I is that we have to deny yourself to follow Him. We have to get the you out of the way so God can work in us. See, if I keep doing things my way and I keep doing things the way I think they should be done, what I'm going to find is just a lot more heartache, a lot more brokenness. I'm going to be like all these people who are surrounded by this pool trying to find hope in something outside of Jesus, trying to find healing in something outside of Jesus. And I'm going to go there and I'm going to go back over and over again, and what's so crazy is nothing changes, and I keep going back. I have to remove myself. What did Jesus say? Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow Him. To be a follower of Jesus, listen, we have to get rid of the self part. We have to. Look, Romans 3 tells us that every soul here is guilty of sin. Everyone has fallen short of the glory of God. Every person. Every single person has. But here's the good news about that. You and I were not good enough, but you don't have to be. That's why Jesus is here right now. And He's met this man who's been looking for hope for 38 years, and He asked him the same question. The same Jesus is asking you the same question today. Do you want to be healed? Do you want to be healed? Or are you like this man? And we just keep going back to the same place over and over again, trying to find hope and coming back empty. It's not working, but I'm just going to keep going back to the same lifestyle. Everybody else that's broken is laying over there anyway. So I might as well just go to everybody else and just keep doing the same thing as well. If that's you, look what happens next. Verse 8. Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed, and he walked. In the midst of everything around him that promised him hope and healing, the only place he was ever going to find it was in Jesus. For you and I today, everywhere around us, culture, the media, success, money, jobs, career, your family, everywhere you think you're going to look that's going to give you hope, true hope, that's going to give you healing, true healing, everything else that promises it is always going to come up empty. Listen, because it was never meant to. The only place you and I are ever truly going to find real hope and real healing is in Jesus. And what's so beautiful about this story is, listen, this man did not do anything to earn this healing. He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything to deserve this healing. For 38 years, he looks elsewhere, and all of a sudden here comes Jesus, and Jesus looks at him, and he offers him hope. Nothing that he did to earn it. And what's crazy about this is where this took place was a pool called Bethesda, which means a house of grace. And do you know what grace is? Grace is you and I getting what we don't deserve. The hope that Jesus offers us this morning, you and I don't deserve it. That's what makes it so wonderful. Listen, it's something that we can never attain on our own. It's the reason people will try over and over to chase everything in the world they can to make them feel fulfilled, to make them feel like they have a purpose and a desire, to make them feel like they're really somebody. And they always come back empty. They always have to have more because nothing else was ever meant to give you hope outside of Jesus. Nothing else can fit that hole in your heart outside of Jesus. He was the only one that was meant to. And Jesus looks at him, he tells him to get up, take up your mat, or take up your bed, according to what translation you're reading. Why would Jesus tell this man to take up his mat? For 38 years, this man had lived his life on that mat. It had carried him. And now Jesus is telling this man to get up his mat and take it with him. Why would Jesus do such a thing? Because what Jesus is telling him is this: you don't live here anymore. At this place where you were lost and at this place where you thought you were going to find hope and you were going to come back empty over and over again, what Jesus is telling this man is, hey, that place, get your mat when you get up and walk because you don't live here anymore. That place is gone. That you is gone. You don't live there anymore. You no longer have to go through this life searching desperately for hope, searching desperately for some kind of fulfillment and other things in life, because now you have it and it's in Jesus. So take up your mat and walk. Jesus gives that invitation. The response in verse 9 says, and at once the man was healed. Ain't that a beautiful picture? That's how it works when we turn to Jesus, at once. Spiritually, you're bankrupt. Your heart is broken. Then at once, we turn to Jesus. And he took up his bed and he walked. He took his mat with him because, listen, the healing was permanent. There was no need to go back. And we got people here today, listen, this is what we have to grasp. If you're a Christian, Jesus gave that same invitation to you, to get up and walk. Maybe you walk down the aisle, whatever. You're walking your life, you're following Jesus. What we have to realize is that mat, get it up with you and take it with you and stop going back to those same places. Stop going back to those same lifestyles. Stop going back around that same crowd of people. Listen, there is nothing there for you. It's gone. That's not who you are anymore. There's no hope there anymore. The question we have to ask ourselves this morning, when the hurt returns, none of us are immune to it. When suffering returns, when it comes back in our life, where do you turn? Is it a person? Is it success? Is it money? Is it alcohol? Is it drugs? What is it you turn to when the hurt comes back? Because that's where you're saying your hope is at. That's what you're saying, hey, listen, this right here is what's going to heal me, because I'm going to go back to this. And this is going to fix everything. Listen, you may be here this morning, you may be hurting more than any of us can comprehend. You may be going through stuff that nobody here actually knows, and you're hurting, and you have pain, real hurt and real pain in your life. What I want you to grasp this morning is this: there is a God who loves you. In the midst of that hurt, okay, in the midst of however bad that suffering is, He is not a God who just wants to kick you while you're down. He wants to pick you up. He wants to give you a hope and a future. You know, the interesting thing about John, the Baptist we looked at earlier, is that he did turn to Jesus when he was questioning what was going on. John never left that prison. John died there. But you know what John died with? Hope. See, listen, there are things that are going to happen in this life that we are not going to understand. This side of heaven, we are not going to be able to figure out. But every Christian here today should be encouraged by this, by God's sovereignty, that God is in control no matter what is happening. There's nothing that's going to happen that's ever going to surprise God. No matter how bad it hurts right now, no matter how hard it is to figure out now how much it consumes us, there's absolutely nothing that's going to happen that's outside of God's control. And I promise you His word is true, that He is going to make all things work together for good, whether in this life or the next. See, a lot of times our Christian life looks like a tapestry. On one side, what you have looks like a mess. You have lines everywhere. It's cloth, whatever it is, different colors. It looks like a mess just everywhere, pulled from one part to the another. Lines everywhere. But then when you flip it over, well, then you see the picture. Then you see all those things that were going on, what it was pointing to. Because when you flip the tapestry over, what you see is the image it was creating all along. We may not get to see that image this side of life, but we will in the next. And then we'll get to see, oh, God, I seen where you were. I seen what you was doing in the midst of that hurt, in the midst of that suffering, how you was drawing people closer to yourself. God, I see how you was doing that. In the midst of everything going on, God, I see that you was working. That's why you told John that, hey, listen, the lame will walk again, the blind receive their sight. I see what you were saying now, because what you were telling me was, God, the whole time you're still working. In the chaos or how dark it seems the whole time, God, you were there. That peace I was able to feel in the midst of all that hope I was still able to grab onto in the midst of all that, God, that was you. I see that. There's only one catch. Those promises of God are only for those who believe in Jesus. It's only for those. It's only for those who have placed their faith in Jesus. That's who His promises are for. So we may not always experience physical healing in this life. But Scripture tells us, listen, it is not God's will that any should perish apart from knowing Him. Spiritually, you can be healed today. Spiritually, these promises can be for you. And listen, here I love it. Here's the greatest thing about it. You don't have to do a thing to earn it. The man just got up and walked. His life was completely changed because he trusted Jesus, and so can yours. The greatest way I can put this into words, or maybe we can grasp it, is like this. So if my child, okay, who's coloring right now and not listening to me, if she was to tell me, hey, Daddy, do you love me because I'm beautiful? No. Do you love me because I'm smart? No. But you know what? I think you're beautiful and I think you're smart. Well, do you love me because I can outswim you? No. But you can't outswim me. What, do you love me because I look like my mama? Nah. But you do. And if she was to ask me, well, why do you love me? Because you're mine.